Now discovery is key because it's prehistoric age of discovery, but the one who are able to master this discovery can be like big winners. So the question today after this COVID era is, if you're not a platform, you're probably on someone else's platform, and if you're not an ecosystem, you're probably in someone else's ecosystem. So you need to think about how you can build also your own realm, where and increase the number of connections that you have with other platform and ecosystems to be more resilient. So when some links fail, the other links are still alive. The lower the cost of either exposing APIs or the cost of integrating APIs on the other side will lower the cost of making of binding applications together and binding businesses together. And so that will enable like the resilience that we're looking for to be cheaper, right? For me, it's like the internet, but for business.
Hello, and welcome to API Resilience. I'm very excited this week to bring you an episode with our guest, Mehdi Medjaoui. Mehdi is, you're going to see a very energetic guy who's involved in a lot of things. And just in our kind of pre-conversation here, I was amazed at the number of things he's involved in. So I hope that we'll touch on that. He's the founder of the Apidays conference. You can look that up if you're not familiar with it at Apidays.io. He's also a director of API First. That company is found at apisfirst.com. And we were just learning about GDPR.dev. You can follow him on Twitter at Medjaoui. Medjaoui. And Mehdi, welcome to our podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Yeah, thank you, Christoph.
And like in this year, it's been a bit harder to talk with you because like normally I always bump into you at one of the conferences you guys do. I think yet you need very little introduction because everybody in the API scene probably knows you because of the conference series that you kicked off. But this year has been a bit different. So
yeah, it has been a bit different. I agree because of we're all kind of remote at some point, where we have been remote at some point. But and even the events we're trying to do, so we've tried to keep the connection, to connect the humans behind APIs, but now virtually. And we are really looking forward to come back on physical event when it will be possible. But but finally we discussed together, and glad to do it in your API Resilience podcast.
Mm-hmm. So now
we're really excited to have you. Go ahead, Christoph.
So how very early on we decided to go with our event series. We went virtual, and then you've also done that. So maybe before we really get into the deep of things, are there any insights that you can share about doing virtual API events? Are there what are the gains? What are the losses? Anything interesting that stands out?
Yeah, let's say there are obvious gains. The gains is the reach. So for the same budget, we can offer events for free, depending on to increase the reach of let's say the API knowledge, right? And we can also have more people listening, people who could never travel or who never have the budget to travel authorization. So now they can listen to live Apidays content fresh. They don't have to wait for the replays or the YouTube videos. That's really the good point. So our mission is still fulfilled because our mission is really to onboard the maximum people to understand the potential of APIs on the business side, on the societal side, and on the technical side. The drawback is the interactions. So now it's just state-of-the-art content, which is great. But sometimes in conferences you have this after the conference discussions where you learn things that will happen in 6 months in the industry, and actually you learn them 6 months before with nice food and too much drinks. So that's missing, and even the one-on-one interactions of about feeling the space. Now we are all equal listening to the content, but we don't have the feeling about what's really going on and what's the vibe, what's the audience really attracted or not by the content that is shared, then the interaction level is obviously different. So less insight, less weak signals, but more signals, because more people and more attendees to the party.
Yeah. I think that's something that we've seen in our virtual series as well. You just can't quite replicate those kinds of fortuitous meetings and the kind of interactions you have in person, many times by accident. And of course, just the connection of relationships like you and Christoph have developed over the years.
Yeah, but hoping, I think, the next physical event, at least the Apidays series, will be the one we plan is December 2021. So that's far away, but still, we need to be resilient until then.
So, Mehdi, we're talking in this podcast about API programs and people using this time to prepare and to make their businesses more resilient. Can you outline what you think the basic reasons are for any business to be thinking about being API first and developing an API program strategy?
Yeah, for sure. So there are many terms in the industry, like being API first, being API driven, being API led. Right. So it's sometimes they can be misleading, but they all refer to what I call the API mindset. Right. The idea that every interactions should be made programmable to be automated, should be made open in a way that it's that can make people autonomous in the way they connect with you inside the organization or outside the organization, and also the fact that they are easy to be created. So that's what we call developer experience. But that's also the important aspect is that they need to be discoverable, right? The fact that in an organization or in a business ecosystem, we can discover them, discover their value, and integrate them in our roadmap, in our product roadmap directly. So all of this, what I call the API mindset, is what makes, and that's the topic of the podcast, I think resilience from the inside. If you adopt APIs internally, right, breaking boundaries between silos inside the organization, human silos or technical silos, and enhancing the business breadth. So now the business can understand what the IT does, because APIs are designed like products. So they have a clear definition and clear capabilities, exposition, and their value is demonstrated directly. So on the business side, there is also this agility, because now if everything is built as a building brick, the business can be a lot more ready when they have things on the shelf to deliver value to customers, right? And sometimes what it's important, because a lot of people consider having these APIs ready is just saving IT costs, but it's also saving time to market. And that's sometimes more important to deliver something fast than deliver something for cheap, right? And yeah, so internally that's the case, the internal resilience, and outside also is the same, but for partners, for your developer ecosystem, all of the interaction that you've built, all the people that integrate with you, invest on you, and add value to what you are building, actually makes you more resilient. So the question today after this COVID era is, if you're not a platform, you're probably on someone else's platform. And if you're not an ecosystem, you're probably in someone else's ecosystem. So you need to think about how you can build also your own realm, where and increase the number of connections that you have with other platform and ecosystems to be more resilient. So when some links fail, the other links are still alive.
Mm-hmm. And you can like reassemble in a different configuration to restart in a different way. I think one thing that I want to hear, I want to pick your brain on. It's a recurring theme that we've talked about in several of our other interviews. Is one thing that I'm super excited about is democratization of developer experience, or like democratization of this information infrastructure, because I think that's what we're building, is this massive infrastructure of information highways that can be utilized by people that currently need to be fairly technical. One of the things that I think will come, like we had another podcast about this also with Zdenek about this autonomous APIs, but not just in the autonomous sphere, but just generally, how do you think about the democratization of APIs and like a low-no code or any other kind of democratization that you're seeing happening? What's your take on that?
Yeah, so on the, let's say I will take an economy point of view for this, but the lower the cost of either exposing APIs or the cost of integrating APIs on the other side will lower the cost of making, of binding application together and binding businesses together. And so that will enable like the resilience that we're looking for to be cheaper, right? It's for me, it's like the internet, but for business, right? Internet, was been made to be resilient in case of a nuclear attack. So, so the network could still be resilient because it could take another path through the mesh, right? So, through the mesh. So now this is this idea of the more interactions, the more connections you build with others. Again, if some fail, you will still rely on others. So every time you lower the cost of integrating APIs with no code or with a click button or with widgets or code code you have to put on a specific WordPress or whatever, or SDKs or code samples or or full integrations. If you have to do it all the way with the HTTP APIs, let's do it all the way. All of this goes into the same direction that make the business a little bit more connected, more networked, and a little bit bigger than its own walls. There are more resources, more developers, more intelligence, more innovation, more capital outside any organization than inside this organization. So let's be connected to others who can invest with us on what we build. So I find this really great as long as we lower the cost of API integration to zero. That's the end goal.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that this is really fascinating, and the idea that there's value in community. Christoph pointed out in an earlier episode how part of the difficulty we've been having in this time of Corona is because we've kind of taken a lot of the redundancy and elasticity out of the system with all kinds of just-in-time delivery mechanisms and things like this. And one of the things that I think you're saying is that when you create this kind of connected ecosystem, you do have that redundancy already built in.
Yeah, I often call it 3 words. I call it extended. The extended enterprise. That was a book about supply chain, how you can be bigger than yourself because you're extended to your suppliers and extended to your customers. That was about supply chain. But APIs are let's say the digital supply chain, right? You're connected to your API providers, which are your suppliers, and you're connected to your end users or your customers, API users, which are your customers, right? And so and actually APIs are your distribution channel. So it's like logistics, but at internet and World Wide Web scale. So I call them extended. Elastic, ability to react to change. There is high consumption, you deliver. There is low consumption, you are able to downscale, right? And exponential. You are also able to create ubiquitous, multiple concurrent connections and adding value and delivering value to a maximum number of people with maximum reach. And so the cost of the next integration, if your API is great, is actually at marginal cost compared to the previous one. So once it's easy for one of your users or customers to integrate with you, it's easy for the second one, the third one, the 1000th one. And this is what we've seen, company like Twilio and Stripe worth like 20 to $30 billion with only a few thousand employees. And if you just go back to this, that makes around $10 million to $20 million per employee of value. Why? Because they understood that being extended, elastic, and exponential, thanks to great APIs, is actually accumulating a lot of value that, only Apple has this kind of valuation, right? With compared the number of employee compared to the valuation of the company. So that's really a lesson we should remember there. And if I just can put just a simple way to explain it, your API has value. It has a absolute value, a business value. The capabilities of your API has a value. But if the effort to integrate it is bigger than the value, nobody will integrate it. But if that's the goal of developer experience, to lower the cost to integrate, and if this cost becomes lower than the value of the API, then you will have people you begin to integrate. And if you make that cost lower and lower and lower over time, you increase the opportunity cost to integrate your APIs versus building the service yourself, or integrating your APIs versus integrating someone else's API. So developer experience is really making the tipping point between you have to integrate with them because they don't want to integrate with you. And so you invest capital, you invest resources, or the opposite, they invest capital, they invest resources to integrate with you. And this is where accumulation of value comes, and this is where resilience comes. So it's, who integrates who is the main challenge of this network economy.
So, and I want to ask, so I have a bit of contrite, or a tricky insight that I started seeing is because we're a developer experience company. We build dev portals, so we are all about developer experience. But I started thinking that if we're really serious about democratizing this, whatever it is, because if we really drive it forward and drive it to the absolute maximum endpoints with zero cost of integration, it's no longer going to be about developers. Like, is it then about integration experience, or how is this going to evolve? Is this like a new thing? Is this, what is developer experience beyond developers? Do you see this happening?
Yeah. So Zenek is really ambitious and try to do the same and try to remove developers from the integration, to remove humans from the integration. So unless he finally achieve its value proposition, that I hope he will achieve for all of us. But yeah, we still have some time to count on developers to do the integration. But as I was saying, the attention span of developers is really low. There are really constrained resources in the organization, and in the market, everybody's chasing them to hire them. So because this attention span is really small, everything you can do to make the integrations simpler, smaller, faster, cheaper, and less costly in time for the developer will be a really competitive advantage. So I've seen many attempts to try to revolution the developer experience. I've seen some API results into Google search. So if you type some APIs, I know that Google Apidays is having some tests with some customers that when you type some developer portal's name, like I think at the time it was Arab Bank. If you type Arab Bank on some results, you see the APIs in the search engine.
Yes. Right.
So that's a new way to discover APIs. Right. I've seen also chatbots for API documentation.
Yeah.
Right. So chatbots for API documentation. I've seen some, SDKs with some AIs for recommendations for future endpoints you may integrate. So the idea of making the integration smaller, and actually, this is also why GraphQL is also booming, because their ability to make developer integration tools, which are awesome. We can contest the value of the design for the long term, the architectural style, the coupling that it brings and everything. But at least the developer experience is so great with this code complete and everything. So yeah, developer experience is often what I say, the last mile to API integration. And so this last mile delivery is now more key than ever. Amazon showed it was key for delivery, and yes, and I'm sure Pronovix shows that it's key for the API integration.
We have one customer that they went even beyond APIs, and they call it business solutions on their dev portal, which is basically the idea is that you can allow non-developers to make a programmatic connection between their business processes and this organization's business processes. So I think that and this is not that new. Like we already have like applications and integration, like widgets and stuff like that. But what I started thinking was that Yeah, like looking at integrations on a higher level and thinking about how do we expand this and how do we bring it all together? Because there's like integration interfaces exist in different pockets of space in the organization. But I feel that if we bring them all together and make them discoverable, that there's a tech like you can go and do this on a different scale, and it will make like it will shift perspective and create new opportunities that currently are not visible yet.
I liken the shift to being much more than widgets and stuff, because those still require someone to go outside of the tools that are part of any basic office suite for knowledge workers. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think the kinds of things that this customer that you referenced did, and what we're talking about and what we're foreseeing, is that knowledge workers who work with, Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Google Docs, these types of applications, that these knowledge workers are suddenly not working within their company, but they're performing integrations and making some of these connections outside of their company. And that hasn't been done at a very large scale right now, except in batch processing. And so whenever I think to my lean and agile training, it's always about decreasing batch size and trying to get down to a batch size of 1. Mm-hmm. And that real-time nature, the value that real-time nature adds beyond a batch process. And to me, that's what's really exciting about this. And
But also sometimes the way we talk about integration, it's about, because API needs to be integrated, right? But sometimes in companies, integration has this poor legacy view about like making systems that's not connected and not working well together to be connected, right? And so there is a mindset shift right now. APIs since the last 5 years, 6 years, APIs are more thought like a product to be consumed more than to be integrated. So sometimes when I say integration, at least I should say more consumed, because this is the real mindset. I see just the technical point of view, but when you include the business point of view, it's mostly integrated to be consumed. So it's not, let's say, the classic legacy integration that you see. It's more like how in an organization or outside the organization, things can be consumed as a service in a way that adds value to the people who consume it, right? And yes, so there's clearly this shift, and I think it's in the book API Product Management from Amancio Buza and Andrea Julian, when they say there are these 3 waves. The first wave was integration, like I was saying, the old one. The second one is productization, so API as a product to be consumed. The next wave will be ecosystems. The next wave will be ecosystems there, as APIs, as part of even infrastructure to be integrated. But we need to when we say integration, now integration in organization should be consumption. How teams and departments from companies can consume each other, break the silos to generate value and innovation that was not thought and possible before.
So it's almost like integration. You needed a handshake where both parties were privy of the thing you were trying to do. Productization required one party to say, hey, we're going to build an API and here's our API, and like, go for it, go and consume it. So there's one side that was already resolved. And now like we need to go to both sides being resolved, where the information infrastructure of structured information becomes like almost invisible and just everywhere, so that you don't have to do conscious efforts to get access to that information, but it's just there.
Yeah. So integration is finding the ways to make the handshake. API consumption is actually already ordering the good and having the good delivered to your office directly, right? There is no need to make that handshake. Now with APIs and API mindset, where we have enough conventions, we have enough, developer experience work to make it autonomous and just say, oh, I request it, like I order, right? And it's delivered. So it's sent back, I get my response and I get my the capabilities I want, right? So we don't still spend these few months for just being able to do the handshake and waiting for a long time just to deliver value.
Yeah. Very interesting. I wonder what is the role of discoverability in all of this? Because I guess that is... So the way that I've been looking... I started calling dev portals the interface for the interfaces.
Yeah.
So like the central place where you go and find all the interfaces. And I wonder, I guess that role won't easily go away, I think. But I wonder, it will be shifting. Like with integrations, it was more about finding out who you should be talking with. With productization, it's like, here's our products and come along and come to our bazaar and pick what you want. With ecosystems, I wonder how that works there.
Yeah, so two things about discoverability. The first one is that, let's remember that we build APIs for others to build great user experience, right? So we have developer experience for having developers, for making the developers' life easy to build great user experience, right? So that's also, let's remind that when we build it. So I love your idea of interface of interfaces, right? Mm-hmm. And DBS, the bank, the Singapore bank, has an API for finding its APIs, right? So they have APIs for everything, but they have an interface for their interface too, right? Directly.
Very cool.
Yeah, so that's an important point. But discovery is extremely important because discovery was what made the web successful, right? Instead, let's remember we had Yahoo with categories, with directories. If you wanted to go to a motorbike website, you have to click on auto and moto, and then you have to click on motorbike, and then you have to click on the kind of motorbike, and then the brand, and then the model, and then you find the page, right? So that was 7 clicks, 8 clicks, right? Google understood the underlying ideas of the web, like the links between the words and the pages, and with the PageRank, and actually they were able to make a search engine. So we don't have this for APIs because most of the resources are still hard-coded behind firewalls, and so we cannot browse APIs to make a web of APIs and to make a search engine for APIs. So now because we can't do that because the APIs are not all public, and because they also have inherent infrastructure costs, right, that you cannot have free fall. You cannot do APIs like web pages at the time, right? So that's completely different. And now discovery is key because it's prehistoric age of discovery. But the one who are able to master this discovery can be like big winners. Andrew Bosworth, he's the head of growth at Facebook. He was the head of growth at Facebook. He was saying that it's not the best who wins; it's the one everybody uses. And that can say some things about Facebook there. And yes, so you have to be findable. You have to be discoverable. And Bruno Pedro used to say API discovery for a long time will be still little luck plus word of mouth. Mm-hmm. And that's too much it. That's too much this. Some Google search, some events, at Apidays when sponsor wants to showcase their APIs, right? But it's too much like human-to-human discovery. And we don't have yet the right tools to discover APIs. Internally in organization, you can build small search engines because it's a safe environment where we all consider the value is shared. But even these safe environment, some department don't want to expose their assets to other people in other people's department. So even there, it's not easy. So now it's a question about assets, it's a question about capital, about what we give to others or what we keep for ourselves. And so discovery is we're still at the prehistoric age of discovery of APIs, but the one who master it, the one where people go directly to the source, say, hey, yeah, for payment APIs, I know this one. For an APIs for meteorological data, go to the Weather Channel or whatever. That will be key because, that will enable the accumulation of value, accumulation of integration. And when everybody use one, all the other one will use this one, right? It's really a winner takes all, unless we have a search engine that will spread the value to the long tail. We can't have the long tail because we can't have this scale-free networks effect, because we can't have the ability to browse APIs. So now there will be a huge winner takes all for the one discoverable.
And it's because there's been attempts to build like the Yahoo of APIs. Like there's been several attempts like that.
There were many. There were Mashape, Rapid API. There were publicapis.com. There were and even at the origin there were web service in 2010, whatever. A lot of programmable web, MuleSoft, tried to do that. Yeah, but first it can't scale, right? Yeah. It can't scale with the number of APIs. The second thing, The second thing, it's that it's not relevant. People don't look for APIs. They look for capabilities that solve the problem, who hopefully are delivered by APIs. But if they are delivered by magic, they will take it.
And capabilities and trustworthy capabilities. I think the key is the trust, because you can have a brilliant API spec if the API doesn't work, or you can't trust that it's going to stay up and it's just going to disappear. You're not going to want to use it. So it feels like we haven't figured out yet how do we automatically gauge the trustworthiness of an API. I think that Z is working on like analyzing and figuring out, what API should you use. But I think that the trust part, I don't know how to tackle that. That's really the Google algorithm problem.
Yeah. So 5 years ago, I tried to make an API rating agency, like like a mix between consulting and information agency, right? Like a mix between Standard & Poor's and Gartner, right? So I had many criteria about like the policy, is the policy changing, is the policy risky, is the API free or not, like really the term of services risk. You have the technical risk, is the API reliable, is it down or slow most of the time, are the SLA respected, is it the API team behind it, like communicating, being transparent, being active, supporting the thing. So the people aspect, right? We have the design aspect, the developer experience aspect, because what's invested in developer experience is a good sign of good health, right? And the last one was, I think, the politics aspect of the company is that, if the API is key for their business model, they will probably not cut it. If API is a nice to have, it's risky. So we have these 5 criteria, and I tried to map some Twitter and Facebook and others, right? Because you're right. When you consume an API, you consume the company behind it.
Yes.
And you consume the word behind it, the infrastructure behind it. And so this trust is extremely important. But yes, today we almost have nothing. I would just mention one initiative on Apidays.io of a search engine for APIs. But you have to put a Apidays.json file at the root level of your domain to declare your API and to make it browsable by a robot, right? So that's the first try, and there are a few thousand there, but it's not easy, right? It's not scalable, and in a sense, it's scalable technically, but people don't have these incentives. They don't have yet this incentive because, as you say, you're right. It's not directly the APIs. It's the whole. Compared to web pages and to bloggers, like APIs needs a lot more trust because you're really connecting 2 organs together of 2 bodies, right? So you need a lot more trust, and you cannot just trust an API because they're great on the technical spec.
Yes.
So I agree with you.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Like it really feels like we need the equivalent of the backlink algorithm for APIs. But
all these hypermedia evangelists like Micah Munson or I think it was I forgot some names, Steve Klabnik at the time, and others were actually saying yes, but if you allowed links, if you link resources of other APIs inside your API, right? Actually, you're making what the web was doing, and you will be able to understand the relationship between APIs. So, and you will be able to make sense out of keywords, because you will know that for these keywords, this API is linked to these 20 APIs. So these 20 APIs are relevant. And so we can make sense out of a search engine. But we need to put links into APIs like we made links into HTTP and the web to make relations between web pages. Unless we have links, we don't have really a model to that scales, right? We can tag APIs, right? But this is not discovery. When you tag things, you describe them. Discovery is that when you don't know something is here, and actually you find it. When you search for something, you don't discover. Discovery is when you don't search for something, but you find it. It's like being lost on Wikipedia. This is discovery, right? Or being lost on YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, very, very cool. You gave me a lot of stuff to think about. You opened a couple of new cans.
This is fascinating. I have a question. I think I come from some years in mapping technology, location-based services. and web services around them. And there are very subtle differences in these very complex data sets that aren't obvious to casual users. And so I'm trying to imagine how does, in this discoverability discussion, how do you communicate these subtleties? Some people talk about, one ontology to rule them all, but somebody's data model and what it does and does not represent is really important to the proper use of an API that connects to that data. So whenever I hear Z talking about autonomous APIs, at a high level, it sounds very good. As I start thinking about the details of some of the APIs that we used internally to provide some very complicated services, it's hard for me to imagine how to make those things discoverable at a level that people can consume and understand them.
Yeah, but it's also the traction and the adoption that drives. I don't believe in too much in kind of standard. I love standard. I hope that we have more standards. But now the time to deliver standard and the time of adoption is different. Remember, it's not the best who wins, it's the one everybody use. And and yes, so I don't believe in standards because of this lack of ability to design by committee, and so to be too long to deliver right at the end. But again, for long-term industries, like standards are great because they follow the same path, right? So for, nuclear power or, building roads or bridges or dams and stuff like that. But for software, software is too much agile for waiting for standards. So I believe in de facto standards in that sense. But when you believe in de facto standards, is that, it's really dynamic and it's the one who wins. And so for example, schema.org, that's one Scrum standard that Google pushed for schema definitions, is one that can be used. But I truly believe that we need either an official organization, either a Godzilla player, right, someone that's big. But even inside an organization, I believe we need someone to decide. We need someone to say, this is this, and this is this, and this is this. And it's against openness, and it's against let's say, everybody to have the right to use to have their own schema and ontologies and stuff. But at some point, we need a consensus, like in Bitcoin, right? But we need a consensus, or like history and revolutions. But at some point, we need a consensus to rebuild on top of that consensus, right? And then innovation will be on top of the consensus, will be not about the consensus competition, right? So it's time to innovate, and at some point, we decide who is the winner. And then we build on top of this, and then competition with innovation can be ontology and other stuff. And then we have a new consensus because it's too much, and then we close that consensus. And this is the history of technology. It's not the best who wins, but the one at least all have agreed on. And you can check all the standards history. It's exactly that. But yes, so in that sense, I'm in favor of having a player. Can be community-driven, can be like maybe power-driven or whatever. But to decide, because unless we have this kind of standardization or de facto standardization, it will be still too much competition that will drive to too much path that are too much capital and energy spent into too many directions. So we need some freedom in this, but we need some also constraints. And I don't know who will be the one really putting the constraints there. So I have no direct answer. But for example, inside organization, I advise to have a team dedicated to tell what are the vocabularies. The protocol, the format, the vocabularies should be open into listening what everybody wants, but should be strict about what they ask. And that could be a team deciding the constitution, right? That's the history of humanity, but we have a small team of people, the founding fathers in the US, right? Only 4. Or any, it's only a few number of people who decide the rules unless they understood the mass of people asking for it, and that drives that build this constitution or build these rules that everybody will build on. And so I think the same for ontologies and vocabularies. We need people to decide and enforce it.
Very interesting. Mm-hmm. Well, the conversation with Mehdi was just too good to stop recording. So instead of giving you one long episode, we found a good break point. So with this, I'll wrap up this episode. In the second part of the conversation, we talked with Mehdi about his revolutionary ideas about personal data. I hope you'll stay tuned. I think you'll be glad you did.